The second thing that stops us accessing the presence of God is the fear of feeling strong emotions. Running from your own emotions will exhaust you because they are a part of you. They're a part of your intrinsic personality, your character, and the way that you interact with the world. But a lot of people fear strong emotions because traditionally there's not really been a lot of research or understanding into emotions, the importance of emotions and the purpose of emotions. And so therefore a lot of us are not really taught growing up how to process and deal with negative emotions other than to try and just make them go away as quickly as possible. But that's actually incredibly unhelpful because we need those strong emotions to tell us things about ourselves and about the environment that we're living in. And I think a lot of people look at David in the Bible, who wrote a lot of the Psalms, and think, he's a man to emulate. He seems to understand the presence of God in a way that most of us never even achieve in our lifetime now. And we're post Jesus and he was pre Jesus. And he still seemed to have this intimate relationship with God where he really knew who God was, and he really knew what the presence of God was and how to access that. Firstly, David knew how to be alone. So he understood how to live in this place of stillness and solitude and silence and just being still before God. He is the one that wrote that psalm, "Be still and know that I'm God." This came from his own practice, his own awareness of how Jeremy's come to join us. Can you, if you're watching on the video, you can see Jeremy, and my little cat has just come to join us. So David knew how to access the presence of God through stillness, and that was him explaining to us, this is how I've figured out how you connect with God, is that you are still. So a lot of people think, I want to emulate David, but the other thing about David is that he knew how to have strong emotions. He knew how to let his emotions wash through him. So we read in the Psalms, he writes things like, "My soul is in deep anguish." In Psalm 38 verse 8, he says, "I am feeble and utterly crushed. I groan in anguish of heart." I mean, there he's just saying, I'm done. Like I've got no strength in me to face this. I can't. My heart and my emotions are just running riot. I can't do this. And then he also says, "My heart is in anguish within me. The terrors of death have fallen on me." So he knew how to acknowledge where he was at and how he was feeling, and he wasn't in a rush. He wasn't ashamed. He wasn't trying to hide how he was feeling. He was just honest. This is where I'm at. This is how I'm feeling. And that's not just pre-Jesus. We see it, Paul writes in Romans 9, "I have great sorrow and unceasing anguish in my heart." So even it's not like now we have Jesus so that we know everything works out fine. So you just, don't have your negative emotions and just speak out positivity and it will all go away. Like even Paul knew how to acknowledge his negative, so I'm making my own mistake, not negative emotions, unpleasant emotions. He knew how to acknowledge those strong, unpleasant emotions of sorrow and anguish and just embrace them. That's where I'm at. This is what I'm feeling. And there is a huge amount of freedom in living in truth. The Bible says you will know the truth and it will set you free. That's I believe in John. And it's so true that when you acknowledge the truth of where you're at and how you're feeling, it will ultimately set you free. But it's scary to face those feelings. Jesus himself faced those feelings. I think it was, Mark 14, he said, Jesus himself said, "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death." And then in John 11 verse 35, it's the famous verse, "Jesus wept." So even Jesus knew how to walk the road of strong emotions, strong sorrow and anguish, where you just are so disturbed and so unsettled, you don't even know what to do other than what David said. You just groan, you're just groaning inside, or you're just weeping. And that process of learning how to embrace your emotions and let yourself groan, let yourself weep, is a scary one. Because you feel like those emotions are just going to wash over you, they're going to drown you, and you may never emerge. And I, from my own experience, I think I've just learned how to really let those emotions wash over me. And I realised that a lot of where my anguish was coming from with my strong emotions was fearing the emotion. So there was a lot of shame wrapped up in that, feeling ashamed that I was having these strong emotions. Sometimes it gets communicated in Christian circles that it's weakness, that you're just not living in faith, that you're not speaking out truth, and that you're not trusting. And so there can be a lot of shame when you're in that place of sorrow and anguish where you're feeling strong emotions. The shame that can come on you, feeling like, oh, I don't want to feel like this, I'm not allowed to feel like this, can actually hinder you from just allowing the natural flow of the emotions to happen within you. So when I stopped fearing the emotion, by connecting it to lots of other thinking, like, oh, it makes me a bad person, or I'm going to be a bad Christian, or I'm never going to recover from this, and it actually just. So I almost like, when I feel my strong emotions coming, switch off my mind and all my thinking and just be honest and just go, this is where I'm at. This is what I'm feeling. And just let the emotion do its work. Just let it flood through me, wash through me. That means that I weep. That means that I cry. But I actually find that it's not such a prolonged process when I allow myself to just let my body do its natural course. Emotions, Dr. Joan Rosenberg speaks about this a lot, that actually the biological process, that the chemical signals that get sent in your body that give you the physical sensations of the emotions that you're feeling only last for about 90 seconds. Like it's not designed to stay in that place of anguish, and it's often our thoughts that keep triggering the emotion that make you stay in a state of anguish. Whereas actually, if you can just not fear the emotion, just embrace it and just say, this is my emotion, this is the emotion that I'm having, and just let that, like, surrender to it almost. Just let the wave of that emotion run through your body. You will find actually it does work like a wave. There's this peak that comes and then it dissipates again. And in that place you kind of have a bit of solace, and you're able to think a little bit more clearly, and you have a little bit more peace in you. And so whatever challenge it is that you're facing, which has triggered the emotion in the first place, you're actually better able to approach it and navigate it. But you have to let the emotion do its work, just wash it through you. And I think it's the resistance to the emotion that actually causes people the anguish, and they act out in other ways because they're actually suppressing their emotions. So being able to access the presence of God and being in the present is very linked with this process of not fearing your emotions. And it's very tempting and appealing to deny our emotions and try and avoid them, because there is a high level of vulnerability that comes into play when you acknowledge your emotions, when you allow your emotions to wash through you, and to be honest and say, this is how I'm feeling, this is where I'm at. Most of us would rather avoid vulnerability, but it's the only road to freedom and life, because it's truth, and we have to live in truth. The truth will set us free. So I'll just leave you with a quote from Joan Rosenberg herself. She said, "The moment you allow yourself to shift over from avoiding unpleasant emotions to allowing yourself to be in touch with them, your experience of yourself changes. That changes almost immediately, because now you're living as a more whole person. When the self gets disconnected from the self, that leads to anxiety and depression and a whole bunch of other feelings and reactions. So when the self is connected to itself, meaning we're aware and in touch with what's going on, then we feel more whole. We have an inner peace and a contentment, and that's the basis of confidence," which is just a fascinating quote to me. And so, yeah, I'll just leave you with that actually finding peace and wholeness is definitely not avoiding your emotions. You have to embrace your emotions in order to walk this road into the present, and in the present finding the presence of God, which is where you'll find your strength and contentment to give you the energy to keep going, and the wisdom to know how to tackle what you're facing. So just to give you permission that you are allowed to have your strong emotions, don't fear them, don't be ashamed of them, just let them do their natural course, let them run through you, weep if you need to, but don't fight them. When you fight them, that's actually when it gets worse. Just let them wash through you. It will be hard to begin with, but you will get the hang of it over time, and it will significantly increase your ability to experience the presence of God and the peace and the joy that comes with that.